Well, welcome to the George Lynch Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Legendary Gear, the game call company that is legend by design. Well, folks, a lot of through our podcast, I do a lot of instructionals. We do things on my opinion on calling and hunting setups. We talk about turkey, deer, waterfowl. But once in a while, we get some great people, some great friends that on our shows to talk about our past and who we were and where we are today. And today is one of those guests, the guy that I've known for 35 years, like we said, probably at least him and his family. And I would say that him and his dad were a big inspiration to me into waterfowl hunting and where he's at today. I'm so proud of him, and he's recognized as probably one of the elite premier outfitters in the country. And I'm just proud to call him my friend. So today we have Brad Albeck of Albeck Adventures. Welcome aboard, Brad.
Thanks, George. Glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, I am too. We go back a long ways, and you're this young kid, and your dad was best way to explain George Albeck, folks, is that you take a ball of energy that was like this, and you compressed it to this right here. And George was one of those guys that was just full of life, always upbeat, always funny, and always competitive. And I think that instilled into you and stuff. But I can remember in the early days, back years ago in Michigan, I was deer hunting. The waterfowl hunting to me was, it wasn't the big passion that I have today. But Brad, you and your dad were the first people that I got to know and become friends that were truly hardcore waterfowlers. Deer hunted, you guys deer hunted, but you were without a doubt, premier duck and goose hunters, and you guys did your small game and everything, but you were definitely the guys that I knew in Michigan that I first met with, like, wow, these guys are hardcore. And you were guys that I got to team up and learn a lot from, and sit back and observe and help me guide me in my direction. But why don't you talk about a little bit of your past and beginning, you and your dad, and how you got started in waterfowl?
Well, my dad came out of Illinois, and he was always a big pheasant hunter and a rabbit hunter. And we moved to southeast Michigan in Adrian there, and the pheasants really took a bad decline from the clean fence rows and the chemicals, and there just wasn't very many pheasants. So his boss, Jerry Gordon, got him into duck hunting on Lake St. Clair. And then he'd save up money, and we bought what was that sporting goods place? Fitzgerald's on the east side of Tecumseh.
Yeah, and Tecumseh.
Yeah, a million years ago. And he bought 24 Carry Light duck decoys, and then we had to save up our money for another 2 floating Canadian goose decoys. And now, George, I'm looking out the window. I have 24-foot, 16-foot, 16-foot, 12-foot trailers full of full-body decoys now.
Oh, my gosh. The spreads.
Yeah.
Compare it. Let's talk about the waterfowl hunting back then. To me, the terminology of back in the old days of waterfowl hunting was that you hunted waterfowl in water. And I remember that back in the early days, the first early season, the first late season, and that's when I really started coming in and getting involved in it. So I was more integrated into field hunting, and the water hunting I did is when I started guiding from Knutson's and stuff like that. And of course, then that's when you had Zink, you had Foils, you had Grounds, you had all the guys, Alabama, and all these guys that came up and guided. And then, so we got to hunt the water spots with the spots that they had leased. But, field hunting was my first going in. And so that was kind of a little bit, I would say, a different perspective when you guys started, because waterfowl hunting, the duck hunting was done on water. And to see where that's at, where that started, and then to see the transition today, it's really, do you think it's a good thing and a bad way? I look at it together, but do you think sometimes that we miss the internship, like you, when we started, and you started, there was an internship, there was stuff we did one thing I will say back in the day, I think that we were really creative. You had to be creative because we didn't really have the products. Like you said, I mean, you saved your money to get 2 goose decoys. So you really had to utilize how you set yourself up, your calling technique, your calling. I don't think calling was the more of the contest. It wasn't, none of that was ever entered your mind. Every day was whatever I could do to sound more like a duck or sound like a goose, but I could kill more ducks than geese. And, I just remember back in the day, we were trying to create everything from our blinds to, how we set up and spots that we got. And I mean, now you're looking at, like you said, when you started, and then you're looking at today with 4 or 5 trailers full of duck and goose decoys. And clearly you're at a different level today. But do you think a lot of these young kids today are missing that internship?
Most definitely. I mean, from even our clothing that we wore back then, we didn't have the waterproof stuff, the chest waders, George. You remember how paper thin they were?
Oh my
you
gosh.
couldn't wait to get out of that water. And I mean, yeah,
that's true.
I remember my dad had an acquaintance that worked on the power lines, and he brought home those insulated rubber gloves to pick up decoys. And he was like, Bradley, look at these. Look, they're waterproof and they're warm. It's amazing, George. You're waterproof and warm.
Yeah. If you ever picture Joe Pesci, if you ever watch Home Alone and Joe Pesci, you'd think of George Albeck, because they had to be somewhere. There's got to be a bloodline that connects there, because that's who I always said. Joe Pesci was a George Albeck. But you're right. I mean, I wore Carhartts. I mean, I had to save money in my first get a Columbia jacket, and that was like, you're really getting into waterfowl if you bought a Columbia jacket. And
for what was it, like 160, 180 for that quad parka? And
yeah.
Like you said, man, you were top shelf with that. And nowadays, they're spending $800 on a coat, $1,000 on a pair of chest waders.
Exactly. Yeah, and you're right. And I look at today, and it's one of the things I commented. People say, "What's the big difference?" And they talk about decoys or they talk about calls, and I said, for me, when I get the older age, I said, so the clothing, with Gore-Tex and what Gore's come out with, and stuff like that. Me being able to withstand being out in the cold elements, because to me, my favorite hunting is when the weather is the most inclement, when it's bad. I love hunting. It's one thing I do miss from Michigan. I miss the late season goose. I loved it laying out there in the snow and getting them honkers, especially when the snow was kicking and them birds come in. But it was definitely the clothing, because I was able to withstand being a younger guy. Like you said, I can remember guiding, sitting in the freaking, standing in that water the whole time, wearing, and your feet are about numb and you're cold, but you keep going. And because, the fight's going to come and there's going to be another fight come in. And guns and all that stuff, we never made excuses. I mean, any gun, I killed a ton of stuff with an old Remington 870 and never even questioned what gun I was shooting. I didn't get enough geese because I didn't have the right gun. It's we definitely come more commercial and more in that aspect into hunting. And I just remember, dude, watching you when we used to hunt there on Loch Erin, that it was awesome because you would you had your setup, but you were very orchestrated and working that goose call and working those geese in. You sit there and I'm learning, and we're in the short reads in the day of the short read, but you're still, your favorite, I believe, was the Shaw Man flute that you ran today. Yeah. And you just had a way you orchestrated your rhythm and that sound that you were just mesmerized and get those geese in. And it was a thing to watch. And I think that had a lot to do with your success and scouting. I mean, we put on miles back then scouting, and the cool, and probably the benefit for us, and I can remember, especially in those early and late goose seasons when they first came in, getting access to hunt. You knocked on a farmer's door and said, "Hey, can I go out and shoot those geese coming in your field?" And he looked down, kill the dang things. It wasn't a problem. Today, it's leases, and if you don't have a lease, if you're in the strong area with a lot of birds, now Southern Illinois always probably had that. because they were always the Mecca, and people wanted that. But throughout the whole Midwest, you didn't see that as much, and you didn't see as many the outfitters, But I can remember, we didn't have the money, but driving around in a beat up truck and knocking on farmers' doors and early and late season, man, it was no problem getting on. And that's totally changed. And that was a beautiful thing back then, probably for us. But it's a different game, especially down there in Oklahoma, I'm sure, where you're at. That that outfitting is a game. That's what you're dealing with.
It is, the last 10 years in Oklahoma it's gotten really, really bad. I don't mind outfitters as long as they're good outfitters. But it seems like somebody will pop up, and even though you've leased the ground, you've leased it for forever, they'll try to come on in and give the farmer more money. And the farmer and you have a good relationship, but he doesn't really want to lose the money, so then it costs me more money to keep that ground. And they're here for 2, 3, 4 years, and then they just disappear. And then, George, here comes 5 more other outfitters.
That's a great point. That's probably one of the things I was talking about, the internship. There's no way that when I first started, working on getting a goose call, and I got to where, hey, man, I can start calling these things in and killing them. But there was no way in my head would I ever think about, I'm going to take people's money and go out there. And with you, I mean, you put years in. You started, man, as soon as you were able to walk almost hunting. And you had a dad that got you and pushed you. And like I said, you went through and you became a heck of a duck and goose caller, heck of a duck and goose hunter before you even got into outfitting. Today, it seems like there's so many young who are learning off social media. They think they're learning off social media. They're learning just a little bit, and they are coming instant outfitters. And I hear the horror stories of guys that have gone places, and booked hunts with kids who snuck on other people's leases and took people's money. And it just seems like everybody, if they can run a duck or goose call and get a trailer of decoys, they're all outfitting. And that's the tough thing that we're competing with today. More so for you than I hear in Iowa, but anywhere that's known in the country, it's got lots of ducks and geese. It's going to have the pressure, and it's people that I don't think are qualified outfitters that are trying to jump in. And like you said, you don't have a problem with good outfitters. It's the bad ones. And what's that old saying? One good thing outdoes 5, 6 good things. One bad thing outdoes 6 good things. So.
My theory is they save their money. I mean, the economy's tight this year. I mean, and some of these are, we're getting towards Christmas times, and I'll hear a father that, hey, son, this is going to be your Christmas present. And if they get with a bad outfitter, it's no big deal to them. But to us, it is a big deal. And not everybody's, George, you have bad days. I've had bad days. I still have bad days. Yep. You think that they're going north and they go west. It happens. How many times have you set up on a turkey and you think he's going to fly down and walk right into your decoy, turkey hunt?
And he's on the other
and he goes the other way. But it happens. Exactly. But I've actually will pull the dad off to the side, or, they'll pay the money. And I'll look at that kid and I'll peel off, the dad's money, and I'll hand it to him. I go, hit him on the shoulder and go, here, go get your kid a good Christmas present.
Wow. Yeah.
It's not his fault that the wind blew 50 miles per hour in Oklahoma that day. But, I try to have a conscience. I always said, if you guided me on a turkey hunt and, we had an opportunity I missed, I'll pay you right up front, But it's just trying. I think a lot of these guys just don't try.
I agree with that. And you said something in a conversation we had, I don't know, months ago, but to me, I thought it was a very, it showed who your character was. And we both have been on hunts where you guided people and you had great shoots. And, there's some guys you can't kill it. They shoot their limit and they shot it quick. They couldn't kill enough. And those kind of guys that when it gets done, they're walking away and you're looking, well, excuse me, sir, the work is, we got to clean these things. And some of these guys, they don't want to clean them. They just want to come and shoot and kill them, and they think they pay their money. But you made a comment to me that it's important to you that you make sure those clients that, hey, we're going to clean these birds. And we're not just going to shoot these things and waste them, And I thought that was a great, testament of your character. Of sure, we got to kill the birds. That's how we make our money. And the better these guys shoots, that have shoots, and the more they kill, the more that it helps in your revenue, what you get. But you still, even when it comes to money, you got to have that ethical, moral objective in your heart that, hey, this is a resource that we're not going to disrespect. And when you talked about that, how you approached some of your clients and said, hey, you're going to clean these birds and help clean these birds anyway. And I just thought that was awesome.
You got to. I mean, that's just a respect for wildlife.
Yeah.
And that's just being a good hunter.
I think that is a great testimony, like you said, to the young kid who came at, Dad took him on a good hunt and we shot the birds, but this outfitter is also teaching them that, hey, this is part of the hunt is actually preparing the table fair and taking care of the resource that we get. And I remember you said that, and, you have a great reputation throughout the whole country. That people usually know if they're going to hunt with you the day in, day out, that you produce pretty good, and or you wouldn't be in the position you're in and the success you've had. But with all that said, you still put high priority, and I salute you. I mean, kudos to that, because in this industry, even people I respect as good hunters don't always put that part as part of the importance of the hunt, and it's a great thing to do that, because it seems like the emphasis today, and I'm not trying to bash young guys, and not trying to bash social media. I mean, there's good and bad points, but to me, it's way beyond having big groups so we can big piles and, and just getting pictures to put on social media. After that picture's taken, there's more work to be done, and I think these kids today think that it's just about who can put the most most pictures of big piles of birds. And,
George, I'm sorry to interrupt, but yesterday we were about 93 dead birds by 8:30 in the morning. Canadian geese and a few white rosses. And the birds kept coming. They kept coming. And I looked around and I said, I think they had enough today, fellas. And, we have an 8-bird Oklahoma Canadian goose limit.
Wow.
I don't need to kill 8 birds to make everybody happy, George. I like to kill 4 or 5 birds. Why do you got to have, and we had 14, 15 guys in the blind, 16. I mean, we put up a 5 front, 5 back panel blind, dome up, get it dark with the grass, TP it up, and we were in a dirt field. And one guy, I was like, they had enough. And one guy was like, what's the limit? I said, well, the state limit is 8. But, we got about 5. Majority of us have 5. A couple guys have 6 birds. But, well, why can't we shoot more? I said, because I may need them tomorrow.
That's right. And
you guys got a long drive home. You're not leaving all these geese for a tip for me, fellas. You're going to have to clean them, And then, you guys probably want to get a sandwich. And we get you on the road by noon,
And they still had a heck of a shoot,
Oh, yeah.
You brought up another point I'm just going to kind of get into, because I know how tough it is for me. I mean, I was always, the 4 or 5 guys that we guided, and if we had 8 or 10 guys, I would freak out because, I was always worried about the safety aspect, because you've seen so many different things of people, and it just takes, there's only one mistake with a gun. And so when you're hunting with that many guys, tell me what your safety regimen is and how you start to hunt with those guys, and what do you say to those guys some tips that to new outfitters who are listening, who are going to be watching, things that you put as your top priority. This is one of the first things we're going to adjust, boys, before we get in the field. What is your speech in the morning?
Well, we call it a come to Jesus meeting, or a good old fashioned Brad Albeck pep talk. Okay, fellas, 10-2. None of this 3-9. You know what I mean, George?
Oh, absolutely.
Don't stand up. If we're hunting out of layout blinds, when there's hunters out in front of you or a dog, after we shoot, some of us are going to go out there and pick them up. I don't want all gun barrels up in the air. I don't want to hear chambers opening. I don't want to hear chambers closing. The two most common reasons why a gun goes off is loading and unloading. George, we've had a bunch of close calls. Everybody has.
Sure.
It was cold out. Had a flock of geese coming in, and the guy, we put the guns on the outside, and in between your legs, and then shut the Rogers Goose Busters, and we got grass. He blew the grass off the end of his blind.
Wow.
It was like confetti. And I pop up, I go, what happened? Keep calling. I said, no, what happened? Was it a gun malfunction or was it an accident? I need to know, because if it's a gun malfunction, you need to get that gun out of this line. Take mine. Take one of my helper's guns. We do this every day, mister. It's not a big deal to us. But if it's an accident, I'm sure it scared you to death, and it scared us all. We're going to be a little bit more safer.
Good for you. I can remember, you're speaking of it, because it's just one instance, and sometimes, and it might be tougher with the bigger groups, but when I would guide, you get to know the guys, I could almost feel the person that I really thought I better keep my eyes on, or, how long you've been hunting. You kind of feel it. And I'll never forget years ago, was down in Southwest Iowa with a guy, and we had Ron Lackshaw hunting with us, and he had a buddy from Kansas who was the snow goose jumping king in the world. Kenny Thexton was his name, and I'll tell you what, we showed up, and Lackshaw was a hoot, man. He was a blast. Of course, we were all hunting out of X-Landers back then, so you had everything closed but just your face, And I remember we had this client from Michigan, and he hunted the day before Lackshaw, guided him the day before. And I kept telling the kid that really had the outfitting. I said, dude, I don't feel comfortable with this guy. Man, we were having conversation with this guy at dinner, and he's talked about suicide in his past and stuff like that. I mean, I feel bad for this guy. He's going, his wife was calling when he was there, wanting to know if he was there. And I mean, dude, I said, this guy, I'm going to watch. Well, the next morning, early in the morning, we're setting up, and it's dark, and this guy is getting in his X-Lander, and I happen to be, it's dark, and I'm on the right front. I'm like maybe at 1 o'clock. Lackshaw's probably at 11 o'clock. And we're getting the final decoys, or it could have been setting the speakers. I can't remember. We're snow goose hunting. And I'll never forget, in the dark, and all of a sudden, this guy gets in his X-Lander, and he reaches up to grab his shotgun to pull it back. And his finger was on the trigger. And when it went, boom, and all I can remember was just the percussion. I could feel it running past me and seeing this big orange flame. And dude, I freaked out. I mean, we could have easily been standing, a couple feet. Either one of us, to the right or the left, would have blown our legs right off. And I actually pulled that guy right out of the blind and walked him to the car. It's just that was scary. Of course, if you know Lackshaw, he was just real calm, and he looked at me and, oh, that's not good. No, that was, beep, 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 and it just, he had that. But like you said, it's that one time that he had his safety off and reached up and to pull his gun. And it was dark. He was just getting his blind, getting set up, and you can't watch everything, And thank God to the good Lord that we were lucky. But it just takes that one instance, and safety is one thing that guiding that I could never try to preach enough to people. If I mess up on the call and the geese come in and I call a shot too early or too late, that's on me. But we were taught from a young age that hunter safety. That my dad, that having shotguns and pheasant hunting and squirrel hunting and learning to take our own guns apart as kids and cleaning them, putting them back together. And I mean, we knew all that, and safety was, even today, it's still my issue. I double check myself. I'll double check my wife, or when we're hunting, hey, safety. It's just one It takes that one time. And I don't know if you saw on social media, was it last week? They were talking about that hunting accident where they're hunting the water and a kid happened to be out in front getting a duck, and one of the guys in the water shot and didn't know the guy was out there. Oh, he told him to go ahead. The birds came in, I think it was, and he ducked down and told him to shoot. And then raised up, and one of the people shot his head out. I mean, killed him.
Terrible.
And it's terrible. It's heartbreaking. And I'm sure it's heartbreaking for the guy who pulled the trigger. And that's clearly a negligence, in that. And I call that on both parts. I mean, God, I feel so bad for the guy that died, but there's way. I mean, I've been out in the water there and moving decoys or something, have birds come in and tell the guys, don't shoot, or even if the dog's out there, don't shoot. But to tell somebody to shoot over you and go ahead and shoot, man, and like you said, it only takes one time. But that's only one of the things I had for you, because I know you hunt with those big groups, and that was always, how do you control the safety aspect of that? And like you said, there's been accidents, but you've done a tremendous job of all the years. I'm not trying to jinx you or anything, but you've done really fun.
Yeah.
And I think again, it's from. I keep going back to the internship of your base of land. Guns were never new to you. You grew up with guns, whether it was guns, pistols, shotguns, rifles. I always remember you had all kinds of guns, and your dad had guns, and you guys shot all the time. It wasn't nothing new. It's just, again, today's kids, that's what I'm saying. Learning to run a call is only a small aspect of becoming a waterfowler. It doesn't make you a waterfowler. It's only a small aspect. Ordering a bunch of stuff from Rogers Sporting Goods and having a great trailer looking great is only a small aspect of becoming a waterfowler, And so if you're going to, Bradley, if some of these young kids out here today and someone's watching it and they're wanting to get in, they've hunted with some buddies and loved it, what would be your best advice for these young guys getting started and wanting to get into it and get better, and how to get better,
Well, George, I mean, we always had a lot of good waterfowlers in Southeast Michigan. I mean, like you and Sabota, like you said, I was fortunate enough to get thrown right to the Welsh next to grounds, and Freddie, Zink, and, they were 150 yards down the shoreline, and even you and Masterson, and, just a gang. But I don't know if I could wake up and buy all that stuff. And, I would, we were about the best in our area.
Yeah, we were.
And to take out people and charge money, if you're not the best in your area, hire somebody that's the best.
Brad, you said it right there. And there's no arrogance in that whatsoever. Because people don't, like I said, the internship and the hours and days and years that you spend in a field, I made a ton of mistakes. And not safety mistakes, but mistakes on, oh my gosh, some of the blinds, and sometimes I didn't call the geese right or call the shot. You learn, but I learned from that. And as you go on, and then when you start guiding, when you get to that level that you're become really proficient, not just on and know how to run a call and how to set a spread, but also how to scout and how to set that spread and how to read birds and know when they're going to fly, and being consistent, being successful for yourself is one thing. Then take it to another level that you got to be successful for 5 or 6 or 8 other people. And everybody, it's one thing that you and I could walk in a field and probably 2 or 3 volleys and walk out of the field and be done. And because we've done this isn't Ron Lackshaw's favorite quote was, "This isn't my first rodeo." And but today it's you're absolutely right. To reach that level, for me to think that I'm going to take, you had to like to guide at Knutson's, man. When Sonny Jack approached me, he came to me a year earlier and talked to me. I was the only guy from Michigan that was guiding for him. Like you said, you had grounds, you had Zink, and you had Derb. You remember Derbyshire?
Oh yeah, Steve.
He passed away. Was it last year?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And we had Foils and had Tabner. We had a bunch of guys that and I would say that helped me being around. We were from a certain area, and we knew our area, but then we got infiltrated with some guys from a different part of the country who grew up doing the same thing, and I learned a lot from them, but it took me to a level higher than what we were. That's the same way with you, because these guys were your friends too, and like you said, you had to compete against these guys, and you know, we were, and that was, man, that was a heyday though, man. There were, I don't want to get off subject, but can you imagine how many birds that died on that lake there in Loch Erin and that bay?
Can you imagine if they dredged that for lead shot now? Back then when we could shoot it?
Oh my gosh. And all the 10 gauge hulls and everything is probably in the bottom. But man, that was a, you seen it, you were there before I was in the heyday. In fact, folks, this was a spot that was a man-made lake out in the country. It had all the perfect settings because it was surrounded by great, rich farm fields that surrounded this thing. It was made that, it had bays. It also had a part of the lake that dog-legged out that opened up that was great for roosting big migrations of birds. And then you had the bay end that, you really didn't have to have, the wind wasn't a huge effect out there in that bay, And then that was surrounded by crop fields. And those birds could just, and the migration, it just seems that it was very imprinted back in the day that a lot of migration birds, stopped there. And you saw that before I did. And I can remember Grounds telling me years ago, I said, Tim, you've hunted all over and had some great goose hunts. I said, where would you say was some of the best area that you ever goose hunted? Loch Erin and up to Troltz's. Without a doubt, he says that because, they came up there, those geese never seen what those guys saw in Southern Illinois, And I can remember when we first when Bigfoots first came out, oh my gosh, all died and went to heaven. Being with Knutson's there, we all were getting our Bigfoots. And that was the first transition really that we, of course, Carolite and Flambeau might have had some full bodies, but, Bigfoot was just like, that was the upper, that was driving the Ferrari when you got your Bigfoots.
I still got a 16-foot trailer in a shed full of Bigfoots.
No kidding.
Yeah. Now we even got flocked heads, George. I know Bigfoots. We're uptown on them.
I remember the only thing used to upset me is with the Bigfoots is that I ended up having to drill and put drywall screws in because those leg bases would, you're always trying to get them and get those, and those leg bases would always pop out,
We still do it. We actually will have a screw gun party and put them all back together because, we kick them, throw them in the trailer. We don't bag anything on a Bigfoot trailer.
Right.
That old term, 5 pounds in a 3-pound sack? That's when you open up the doors, you better get out of the way because they're coming. They're all piling out.
Well, you know what? You brought up a good conversation on this point too. The Bigfoots, and you're still using them. What's your opinion on today's decoys compared to yesteryears? Evidently you see a lot of value still in the Bigfoots, or you wouldn't have a big trailer full of Bigfoots. Do you have a decoy that you pretty much feel is your top choice, or do you think they're all good and they're all going to work for me no matter what?
I've been running a lot of the GHGs, the fully flocked. I got about 30, 40 dozen of those, and we do bag those every day. I still like the Bigfoots because if you need we're not chasing 400 or 500 geese. We're chasing 10, 15, 30,000 Canadians in a feed. And if you're going out there with the same setup and blowing the same call, doing the same stuff, your kill rate's here, and then it slowly starts to fall. I have 50, 75 dozen silhouettes. A lot of them are real geese. And, just sometimes you got to give them a different look.
Yep, absolutely. A different presentation. You talk about that. I'll never forget years ago back in Tecumseh, I was one of the first ones. I remember you and your dad come out there sitting in the driveway of my sister's house watching me and Sabota laying in freaking Tyvek suits and laying, we thought we were freaking nuts, laying on styrofoam.
Yeah.
But we had great fields, and those geese weren't used to being hunted. But that Red Mill Pond stayed open, and when Manchester froze out and Saline froze out, we got dumped with thousands of birds that landed there. And of course, we had right there at my brother-in-law's. That was a field that was right on the border of the city limits. It all depended if we had a west wind or east wind. I also had, I went to school with a kid. I forgot about his dad's farm on the east side, so depending on the wind, we had both fields, and each field was bordered to the city limits. So you were getting the first look. And back in the early days, man, when those birds would lock and come, they would finish. There was just, it was all about feed, and we didn't overdo it. We didn't overcall it. We were just whatever it took just to get, when they started locking up and finishing, you just, Wendell Carlson, you say in his old tape, put the call in your pocket, boy, and let the birds come. And later on, when the pressure got going and more people, Sabota and I happened to be over on the East Field one day, and here we are, all Bigfoots laying in final approach blinds, and them friggin' geese were coming out, and dude, they act like they were going to eat you up, and then swing about 100 yards out, 80 yards, swing around, and we'd pull maybe one or two off because we were calling hard, but they go over to the other guy. There'd be guys in the other field. They wouldn't get them. They go over here, bang, bang. And then they were going to this huge cornfield, and I can't remember that guy's name. It was yearly. Every time he had corn, he didn't allow hunting, but it held the birds in the area. I like that. But I remember Sabot and I were talking at work one day, and he said, dude, what do you think's going on? I said, well, dude, look at it. Everybody's using the same decoys now. Everybody's using a layout blind now. And I said, hell, we probably talked to those guys how to run a short read. Everybody's running the short read. They're seeing the same thing. They feel more comfortable going to a field not seeing anything. And so at that time, I think we had 18 dozen outlaws together that Freddie got for us back when Jim Cripes had the outlaw out of Washington. And I said, you know what, let's go out tonight. Because I always had mixed feelings back then with the silhouettes. There wasn't a lot of education. It was a lot of trial and error. You know that back then. And I wasn't really big. What I noticed when we hunted around Troltz's up there, we mixed them with the Bigfoots. And I saw mixed results with mixing silhouettes and the Bigfoots and full bodies. So I kind of just pulled the silhouettes out. Thought we were better off with just the full bodies. And so anyway, I says, you know what? Let's just take all our silhouettes and no full bodies and just set those silhouettes out. Not saying that they're better or anything else. It was the same field, same geese, same guys laying out, all that. But it was bloody. Dude, they came into us like they had never been hunted. We shot our limit quick, and it was the different presentation. And I can remember up there at Fay Lake, up in Manchester, one of the fields that Sonny Jackson had. He had 2 or 3 pits in that field. And I had a group of guys, and Freddie and his dad, old man Fred, were hunting the field north of us, northwest, the other pit. And they were in the same field, but in the other pit. And at that time, man, Freddie had just did an article with Jim Cripes about the outlaw silhouette, and guys that came in the store that morning, how the clients would all hook up, and Fred, they were all asking Freddie about the silhouettes and what he thought. He saw they're going to be the new best thing coming out. And that morning, I had 2 dozen Bigfoots that I set out in front of our pit. And I looked up on the hill there, and Freddie had 20 or 25 dozen outlaws that he set out. And I mean, that freaking pit looked black. And those guys looking at me, he says, well, wow, look how, I'm like, oh, yeah, he's got a lot of decoys, You know what? We were the only ones that pulled the trigger that day in killing geese. Yeah. We just crunched them. And we did have some, I guess Fred said they never pulled a shot, never shot. And he said a couple times when we tore into them, boom, 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 that there were some geese flying to them, but we kept shooting and the geese pulled off. Of course, we didn't see that because we were busy shooting. But, it's just, even today, silhouettes to me was a tool. It was a tool that I was going to use in the late season, just like the flute call. When we did our first flute calls, when Trevor Shanahan worked for me, Trevor turned some, and I liked the flute. I liked the sound of the flute, and I used the flute mainly in that late season, especially down there in Monroe and Erie. They're off of the hunt clubs. Joe Robinson, he had all the good fields around there, and But the fields that I would hunt, I was taking some of the guys from the hunt club. Joe would be over in that prime spot with Freddie and all them. We were out shooting them, and it was just me running the flute. And that day I hunted with Joe one day over there. And I said, just let me try the flute, run this flute and see how those birds. And it truly made a believer to him. Not, again, trying to say that was any better. It was just, it sounds like a goose, and it's a total different pitch and totally different what they were hearing through that whole season, and I don't think, again, like you're talking, that you have the creativity that we created as young hunters still goes to me today. I'm always thinking, maybe sometimes I outthink myself, but I'm always, if it works good, that's good. It's good for that day. But I'm looking for, like you said, I look for tomorrow. I look for the day after that. And these birds today, I think, are a high quality, high definition, different bird that are adapting quicker. They learn, because the ones that don't adapt do die. And
just like the old theory. I mean, back pheasant hunting. My dad would say, we'd pull up, and cut the lab loose, and at the end of the 40-acre field, right at daybreak, the pheasants would be taken off. And I went, Dad, why? We didn't even step in there, and you told me not to slam the car door. And then, we'd walk through the field, and a couple of them would jump up. We'd kill our 4 birds, and he'd look at me and goes, son, we're genetically changing the pheasant in Michigan. Absolutely. I go, what do you mean? Why? He goes, the smart ones run, they fly. The others sit. The runners get to reproduce. The ones that sit die. They don't get to reproduce.
100%. 100%, dude. Your dad was 100% on. Because like you said, when I grew up, we didn't have the geese. Our geese migrated. We didn't have the local flocks. People up in Allegan and stuff like that where they had the refuge. They'd see geese in the fall. So I grew up on rabbits and squirrels and a lot of pheasant. My dad always had good bird dogs for pheasant hunting. Now, getting back to what your dad's talking about, genetically, we're genetically creating a different bird. I agree with that 100%. And like I said, in the day we'd hunt, we had great dogs, and our presentation would be the same. Well, after a while, you'd start seeing roosters, flying up at the end of that field. And of course, guys, they put standards, and that was their way of doing it. But my dad would always break up our presentation, how we worked that field, and come in that field different ways and stuff. And your dad met him one time, but I had a guy named Roger Rothar who was deer hunter, Roger. And your dad got to meet him at my place one year. He came over, and Roger told me a story. And of course, everything he said, he was my alter ego, man. I looked up on him and taught me everything I know really on deer hunting. But Roger was talking about in Ohio, back years ago, it was a sport to him to hunt woodchucks with his bow, with his recurve. And that's how he said I became proficient as a big game hunter, was learning to kill woodchucks with a bow. He says, you can kill woodchucks with a bow. You can kill any game in North American continent. But he said he was telling about this one railroad track. Every time he'd get off of work, he'd walk that railroad track. And first couple times, he just killed the woodchucks. Third and fourth time, he said he didn't see a woodchuck. And one day, not by thought, but by chance, he came in from a different direction on those woodchucks and just killed them again because he changed up his presentation. They got to adapt is what he's trying to say. If a woodchuck, a little furry critter like that can adapt to a hunting pressure, how much more can, a Canada goose, a duck, and a white-tailed deer, and even the coyotes. I'll get into the story on that a little bit later, but you're right, the adaptivity. So let me get with you because, again, I was talking about, I think that you have different tools. And for me, I'm not an everyday using silhouettes. I'm not every day if I'm going to use the full bodies. Again, it dictates the pressure and how birds are reacting, and I'll change to that. Today, there seems to be a big draw, and maybe because of the notoriety or the marking of it has been brilliant. But silhouettes, I mean, these kids everybody's using silhouettes now and instead of the full bodies. And probably a lot of it too is the ease of use. A lot easier to haul a bunch of silhouettes out than full bodies. And I mean, do you use silhouettes? Are they part of when you're hunting, part of your spread?
I have them for what if. I usually don't run silhouettes every single day. I love my full bodies. We're hunting geese that come a mile high, and they come down on top of them like elevators usually. But I still have, like I said, 50, 75 dozen. They're in the shed. But if we get 3 inches of rain here, we can't drag these trucks and trailers out across these fields, across the wheat field, across the cornfield. So we, got a side by side and we can pack them in, and, still hunt that day. What if I've seen it here where we've had snowstorms in Oklahoma and the wind blew 50 miles per hour and it was a white powdery, and drifts were as tall as stop signs, believe it or not. We had to grab armfuls of silhouettes, throw them in your Rogers Goose Buster or your layout blind, grab the boot bag, do the march, 1/8 of a mile out in knee-deep snow. We couldn't get out there and like I said, we're hunting large amounts of birds. You can't kill them with 4 dozen decoys anymore.
Well, you said
the pressure.
Exactly. Well, again, then what you're saying, it's a tool for you. It's not your everyday thing. It's a what if. I like that. I like that. What if this scenario is this, and it's a tool that you're going to use in this certain situation. And it's like all of us. I mean, we're not going to drive trucks and trailers in a farmer's field if they're full of mud and stuff like that. And it's the tool. So the silhouettes are a tool I can use that I can still get on a quad and still get my spreads out there and still obtain a big spread. That is a tool. It's not in your thought process that this is the only thing I'm going to use all year.
No.
I'm like you. I sit back and study and watch, and I see a difference. And even here where I'm at in Iowa, this time of year, usually at Christmas and past the first of the year, if the weather's right, we'll get a lot of Canada geese that come through, and they'll hold up here a few days. You would think, and luckily where I'm at here, it's basically me that suffers the late season and goes after. These guys will go do anything to hunt ducks, but Canada geese, unless it's the young kids, the older guys down here, they're not going to go out and sit in a cold field for a goose. Me, absolutely. And I found I was sitting down here, it was probably 4 years ago at Christmas time, and we had fields of 5,000-6,000 of big honkers that was just and I live right on the refuge, so these geese got to come off the water, and I can sit on my deck and see the refuge, and the birds fly right over. They pile in behind me, so when they're going up to fly where they're heading, they got to go right over me. And so I'd go, they're in this field right here, and they're all over out there. So I'd go up and I'd set a spread, and I'm using some Alp Zero gravity blinds, and you're laid down in there. I put snow on top of the blind, and the height is great. And those birds will come up, and then when they come up over the house, I'll see them coming and heading out. We're on the first field north of us. Those birds will sit here and just act like they're not even breaking wing beat. You'll try calling super hard. You're saying, man, I got to be able to pull a single here. And they're not being hunted, but they will sit there, and it's like snow geese. You're trying your best, trying to get that first group at least to come, because when they start coming in these groups, they'll just start following the leader. But they were in this field yesterday, and the only thing different is all these full bodies that I just put here. And I've tried no calling. That was even worse. I've tried, the flagging. And what I found that made the difference wasn't the amount of decoys. It was the decoys I was using and my calling style. So what I started doing is I went to nothing but sleepers, feeders, and a few uprights, a few centuries. That was it. Everything else was head down. And then I started being able to pull, but my calling, I wasn't using my short, hard, fast call. I was basically taking my older calls or my flute call, and I was spit moaning. And those that pull off, I just hiccup and then just shut up and let them come and get the quietness. They didn't want to hear a lot of noise. It had to be a certain thing. You had to have the I dotted, the T crossed, and then I was pulling birds in. And I didn't have any guys that they were just conditioned that before they got to me. And that you got to be able to see that, especially in Oklahoma, because you're not they're not the first guy. You're not the first guy they see. You know, they're at the end of the stop when they're coming to you. So,
oh yeah.
So I imagine that with you, I mean, you're constantly to be successful as you are, and with that group of guys. Number one, you got it down with the hide. But do you see that you're calling? Does it have to change later in the season or anything like that?
You know, some days they just want the fast clocks, and then other days you got to just blow your guts out all the way to the ground. I mean, and if you stop or catch a breath, George, I mean, they're coming, and you stop and catch a breath, they're gone, and you won't get them back.
And that's
just
probably
that one hesitation.
And that's probably the different geese that you're seeing a lot of the lessers, and where I'm seeing more of the giants.
We're little goose hunters. Even the white birds are little white Rosses.
Yep. I noticed that even in Michigan, hunting giants and hunting lessers, two different calling styles.
Oh, night and day. Yeah.
If we tried to call hard on those big ones like that, we'd blow them out. And Sabota and I would sit there and we do that murmur, and I hit that fast murmur, or you hit it and then you try to slow down and get that wah, 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 wah. You do that right there. Freaking those little geese would just pick up and leave you. Like you said, you had the balls to the wall all the way. Don't lift that call
to the dirt.
To the dirt. I agree. That's a great tip too. It's just the different type of goose you're hunting, the different area. Even in my area, we're hunting, the same area, but it was a different type of goose that you're getting in there. Do you get a lot of specks where you're at?
Yeah, we call them giggle chickens.
Yeah, little chickens. Yeah, we got them here. We started getting them in the bunches, and I wasn't from Michigan used to hunting specks. I saw a few in Monroe there. I was doing a video of years ago, my first one, and I was back at the hunt club, and we were doing some filming of how setups and how to call birds. And my first two specks I ever seen, I didn't even have a speck call. I was trying to giggle on a goose call, and they circled and came right in. Dude, I thought I won the lottery at two speckle bellies, the first ones I've ever seen in Michigan. But down here, 3 years ago, I saw more speckle bellies than I did Canada's. And at that time, I was really using the silhouettes, trying to, do my study. I guess I'm always studying, to see the power I could do with silhouettes over the full bodies. And I was using the silhouettes. I had little spreads. I went to big spreads, the speckle bellies, and we had a few of the big kind, but we had a lot of, they called the little chickens. And they would come up, man, and 200, 250 in a group, more than that. And they'd come off this lake, and they'd head over to us. The first groups would want to look like they were going to work on you, but then they had all these other geese, and I wouldn't call the shot. But it seems when they got a point, because they were coming high, when they got to a point off those silhouettes, I would lose them, and they would just keep going. And that's, I don't know if because they flew higher, and the silhouette wasn't as, didn't stick out like a full body, and it wasn't enough to draw them in. To me, calling had nothing to do with it, because when you got 300, 400, 500 speckle bellies over you, and they're just so friggin' loud that, I think your decoys have to do some of the work. But I couldn't consistently get them with silhouettes to want to come down. I could have shot some, but, when you had that many birds in the air, I wanted birds on the ground, trying to get them in.
Have them do the show, make it look pretty,
do you think that's what it was? That I've always said this before. I think that with silhouettes, that there's a different level of bird. The low flyers that come here, early season birds, they work really good. I find, later in the season when you're getting these high flyers and stuff like that, do you think that can be a hindrance to you on the higher birds?
I'm sure it could be, but I mean, on windier days, or you remember hunting in the snow and they're on the deck. If it's snowing, I definitely want silhouettes.
Yeah.
Or, it's just like the old days of hunting Michigan. It's that heavy, wet snow, and then a goose doesn't have snow on his back out in the field.
Right.
And, so then you got to go out there and you grab thump and dust it off, and then your gloves got wet. And, the good old days.
Those are good old days, yeah. have whisk broom out there. You're whisk brooming a bunch of stuff, Absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean the silhouettes. I mean, with that weather, they're going to fly lower.
Right.
And like I said, they're in the shed if I need them.
There you go.
But it's 65 degrees here, George.
Isn't it something? Do you think everybody here? I know that the drought. We've been 2 years. Last year was a real bad drought here, and this year, all the old farmers that I know told me that this is the worst drought they've ever encountered here, and I knew that it was going to affect our ducks because we have this refuge here, but guys can still hunt the lake. Just there's a buoy that separates you, so any bird that comes higher comes flying. You got your guys are still busting at them when they're trying to come in. So it doesn't really give them a whole lot of protection and feeling safe. But so a lot of our ducks would break off, and we had so much because of the cattle and the livestock and agriculture on here. We have a lot of fairly good sized ponds that held water. And a lot of these areas, especially if you get a pond around here that's surrounded by corn, man, I'll tell you, when the ducks are here, every one of those ponds you'll drive the roads are full of ducks, especially if there's corn on, if there's beans, not much. But if you get corn, it's a killer hole. This year, our ponds are dried up.
I don't know where my ducks are. We have geese here, and I got 15 acres flooded, Japanese millet. They killed 2 hen pintail and a hen mallard off of it this morning.
All my buddies here that hunt, said, guys, we're not hunting. They said, we went out and saw, a handful of ducks this morning driving around. And then we saw a few geese, though. We don't have a whole lot of geese here yet. Or when we did it, a month ago, and they left quick. We got a few geese that's coming here. When we had those north winds last week and the temperature dropped, we got some geese in. I saw a little bit of ducks that came in. They were gone quick. But everybody here is just, they're saying the same thing, that they're not even duck hunting them. Next week at the end of our ducks, we're at the end. So, if you can't hunt them now, we're not going to hunt them if weather gets colder. But I don't know if the ducks are down, or do you think it's, weather? Are they still warm up north?
It has to be, they're still up north. And here it is, almost Christmas. We're right down to, 45 days, George? Yeah. I mean, we end on the last Sunday of January.
Wow. Well, thank God you got the geese then, huh?
Yeah. I got to go chase them here about 3 o'clock. Make sure, they're still around. But, I mean, they're still here. They're still good numbers, but last year at this time, George, that 15-acre Jap millet, we had to go after the hunt, run those ducks out. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, go run them ducks out. 15 minutes after shooting hours was over, go out there, shine the headlight, go. Because I didn't want them sitting in there to feed that out. Because, I mean, my history with Japanese millet, and you have 7,000 to 10,000 ducks sitting on it, you get about 15 to 20 days, and they'll eat it out.
It's gone.
But, I mean, like in the middle of the day, George, I'd pull up, drop the hot fence, drive on out there, honk the horn, just to go. And they wouldn't even, and then it got so bad, I'd take out my shotgun, and I'd put in 3 shells, and into the dark, boom, and they'd lift. And then as soon as they start to sit down, boom, boom. And then 3 hours later, they'd be right back in it, George. Same thing, same crop, full of water. Last year, 7,000 to 10,000. I mean, just every 2-3 days, George, you just beat them.
And now there's nothing.
And bird.
Man. That's
but you know how smart I am. You spend all the money on one. You had a great time, George. So let's get some bulldozers. Let's lease more land and build 4 or 5 of them. And none of them have ducks.
It was, and you just mentioned that we had a conversation back a few months back, and you're working on that stuff. And why don't you tell the viewers all the work it takes to create a water hole?
we had the worst luck. We had 7 inches, 8 inches of rain in the first part of July. And then, are you there?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, we had 7, 8 inches of rain in 3 days. And it's all that lowland farming. So then we had to go buy a Yamaha 4-inch trash pump. And that was $3,000. And then you had to get the hose because you can't just take like 8 million gallons of water and throw it over a fence and flood your neighbor's Bermuda field or his, you had to run it to the river, half mile. So then you had to buy $5,000 worth of 4-inch lay flat.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, George. And then we run it to the creek. And then every 2 hours you had to put gas in it. And everybody's like, well, get a 55-gallon drum or get a bigger tank. Well, no, because you'd have to move that pipe out and, make sure that it didn't catch on fire and this and that. I mean, we would run that pump for 36 hours straight. And then I'd have to go back to work. And then race back out here and, hook it up, fire it up. It got to the point I'd just leave it out in the field. And we did that. It pumped that water down. And then a 4-inch pump, you could only get 4.5 inches of water. Or then it'd run dry. And I wasn't about to spend all that, so then we went around and planted it. But in the middle it was a little bit too wet. And then let that dry up, and then ripped it up with big tractor. Seed, I think $2,000 worth of Jack Millet seed. I got a pallet of it. And then pray for rain. But not too much. But we got some center pivots, irrigations. But we have beautiful crops. No ducks.
And the thousands of dollars. That's what people don't realize. They think that these outfitters are making
and the hundreds of hours.
Yeah, the labor, you can't even count the labor. Wow.
All to shoot a duck. Hopefully we get them. Like I said, we still got 45 days. Water's in there. Then you had to fight the wild hogs off of it. And then every blackbird. But if you flood it, then they can't get to it. So that's why we've got a majority of them all on right now, flooded.
Wow. Huh.
But George, I had it all planned out, man. It looks so good on paper. Hey, I'm going to flood this. Thanksgiving, we're going to shoot that in about 15 days. And about day 10, I'm going to come over here and flood that, get that water up. So, man, we just keep on going. Nothing. Now it's like, all right, either it's going to sit or we can fill it up and hopefully get 20 days out of something.
I mean, a lot of people, but any of your contacts up the north there, any of them telling you that, hey, we're still waiting on ducks, we're not seeing ducks, or do you know people that have ducks?
I talked to Jaron Landers, and he's at Habitat, and I talked to him the other day, and I said, are you killing them? He said, we're killing them, but we're not killing the good ones. I was like, where are they? He goes, man, they're so north of us. And, our friends on Facebook, Russell Fellows on Facebook, December 8th, he was mowing and mulching his yard with green. December 8th in Michigan.
Isn't that crazy?
Man, Farmer's Almanac said that this is going to be a cold, wet year. And, George, I just had my side-by-side tracked with, to get through all the wet and the snow. And I'm starting to scratch my head. I don't know if we're going to get it.
Yeah, we haven't gotten the weather here either. But like I said, the drought's killed us. We had a pond dug. It was 2 years ago. The guy dug it. The DNR helped us put in this pond. It was working as a filtrating system for the water going to the lake and everything. And it's 30 foot deep. And we got this long dike and everything. And it's 47 feet from top of the dike. We got it set so we have a floating well for the horses, and it's got spigots. So my wife has thought of everything. We bulldozed all this timber around there, and we planted the grass is all, and the grass did come up, and the only thing we got coming in is deer. The deer seem to like it, and
Well, as long as something enjoying it,
yeah, something's coming in. So I had Doug Osborne on a couple of times. I had him on again this year. I don't know if you know Doug, but Doug is the head waterfowl biologist for University of Arkansas.
Really?
And yeah, Doug is a sharp cat. In fact, he does a lot of work with DU and all the other people. I met him a few years ago at Easton. I was my last year out there judging the World Goose, and he was out there. They had him come in, him and a couple of kids that worked for him to judge the duck, and we became real tight. And judges his knowledge, Doug's knowledge is just amazing. And so I have him on, always talking. We came up, one of the first things was why the migration, people are seeing speckle bellies. Why are we seeing speckle bellies where we don't normally see them? Is the migration moving? And he talked about it's all because of the habitats changed in Texas, which is by that they're moving because of the habitat, the salt water and all that is disappearing. But we're talking about the ducks. And that was one of the things that he was talking about that they're really watching and worried about was the lack of rain in our potholes and stuff, and what is it going to do for duck production? And they're not going to put the red flag up just yet, but he said they are watching a close eye. And he said the hard thing about this is that COVID, the big C, when it came along, we lost 2 years of information.
Data information, yes, sir.
And he said, so that really put us, so we really don't know what we're to expect, so now last year and this year is they're getting back trying to obtain and try to watch what's really going on with our duck population. So I'm going to get him on again at the end of the year and try to see what they found and what they think is going on and everything. So I think it'll be interesting to see what they have to say. The kids that work for him, man, they're freaking awesome. We went to some refuge. It was outside there, and I rode with him and two of the young kids who had worked for him, who are now got great positions. One works for Ducks Unlimited. The other guy works at what's the plantation? Oak plantation that they have down there.
Is it White Oak? Something like that?
White Oak Plantation. So this guy kind of opens and gives all this they can do studies and they do all the DNR stuff there. In fact, the Wonders of Waterfowl is a program his wife has started. We last year donated, did a bunch of duck calls for all the kids. They had like 100 kids that come to this thing, and what they do is they come to the White Oak Plantation. They have seminars and talking about duck reproduction. Kids get to go out there and handle ducks and talk about the anatomy of ducks. They talk about calling. They do this whole thing, which is a pretty cool thing. But we were at Worlds, and that morning we thought, hey, there was a refuge not far from there, and they wanted to go there and check out the birds over there. Now there was some dang kingfisher, but some type of one bird that they heard. This one bird is normally in Mexico or South America, has been seen in this refuge. Okay, like a little parakeet looking thing, and I'm like, okay, one bird. You guys are all pumped, wanting to go to this huge refuge to find this one bird. And, it was so funny because we're driving through and I'm like every typical other guy. Like they said, I go, oh, an eagle. And they're going, oh, look, he gets oversighted over an eagle. And this young kid picks out and spots this little bird, this rare bird, over on the other side of the bank into this brush, in the brush, sitting in a brush, across this channel, this dike. And I'm looking again, and I'm like, how in the heck did you spot that thing? It's just their condition, how they studied, that was their life. And I thought that was really cool that we got guys we do have some good guys that are worried about our ducks and, with that type of talent that are watching and hoping that we have a future, try to keep that future going with the ducks. And so, yeah, they're a special group. And they love to hunt. They're not one of those biologists or the guys that go out there and they're just pencil heads, pencil necks. These guys love to hunt. I mean, they do it because their love for hunting. So it'll be interesting to see what you have to say at the end of the year here about what's going on with the ducks. I know a lot of guys here are shaking their heads, and everybody says the same thing, that they're still north. I know we were up in Saskatchewan the first week of September. I've got a real good friend up there who it's an hour and a half north of Yorkton, and we find the best way to get there is fly from Des Moines to Minot, North Dakota, and then we rent a car and just drive 5 hours from there up there in Saskatchewan. But what a beautiful place! He's got a home. He had an elk hanging in the cooler for us to eat. We ate elk first time Diane had elk. She said she'd never eat deer again over elk. Elk was amazing, but they had elk, they had mule deer, whitetail, and black bear all right there in the same spot. We were lucky. We knew we were getting there early. Luckily, they had started harvesting a week before the fields, so he started getting geese in. And our first mornings, we said, the guys, we knew we were after the geese, and we wanted to film. We were doing the Bushnell's Primary Pursuit. As Greg Toogood was a show up there, invited us to come up. So, are we going to shoot ducks? And I kind of told him, I said, really, they're not really mature yet. It's going to be hard for me. I mean, if I'm going to do a duck shoot and you want to put it and film it, if it was just a buddy hunt, it's one thing. But if you're going to film ducks, you kind of want to see nice fat green heads coming in, putting the green down, everybody holding green. And we were that morning. You could take your hat and hit the ducks that were coming in. I couldn't tell you a drake if I saw one. They were just that immature. But I think we shot 150 honkers in the 3 mornings, the big honkers. But and that was a good hunt, and they had water up there and everything. But they still got, I don't know what they got for birds up there now or anything. They might be too far north. I don't know. I don't know if they're just north of Dakotas or where they're at. But
I'm not quite sure. I did, you hear all these reports that the Dakotas are froze out in this, but I mean, they need snow cover, George. We got to, even though it freezes, they're going to just hit rivers.
Yeah.
Or bubblers and ponds, And hell, you've seen it in Michigan where Devil's Lake, the 4 or 5, or 2,000 birds will keep a hole open.
Yeah. Yeah, I always said that you got to have the birds keep the water open. You know what? Before we go here, Brad, I got to tell this is always my favorite Brad Albeck story. And I got to tell this story because it tells your reputation, who you are. I'll never forget. There was a farm in Onstead that Dave Patterson was trying to get, and it was a farm that you had hunted. You knew this farm really well, and he's always taken care. You took care of him, and but Dave Patterson wanted to move in and get that farm, and he thought, well, I'm gonna go in like you talked about money. I'm gonna take money and I'm gonna get this guy away from Brad Albeck, and which hurts the business. That's where you said it starts this money deal starts really hurting. But anyway, he went in there and Dave thought he had it locked up. And Brad Albeck catches wind of this. I think the farmer even told you that, hey, I got this other guy. So Brad Albeck finds, and you have to know the history of Brad and his famous uncles. He's had some famous uncles. One was a coach of the Atlanta, is it
Hawks?
Atlanta Hawks.
Atlanta Hawks. NBA coach, Stan Albeck. Yeah.
One was an NBA coach. The other one owned the Cowboy bars and stuff like that all across in the country. Where country music stars went and sang and stuff like that. So you had two. Tori, then you had George, your dad, who was, all three had talent in their own realm. They were all successful. And anyway, Brad finds out that the farmer's wife was a huge Toby Keith fan. And Toby Keith was coming in a concert there. So Brad says, you know what? Well, how about, you can release this stuff, but what would happen if I got your wife to meet Toby Keith? And of course, I'm sure he probably thought this guy's, this kid's been smoking one before he came to the car or came to the farm here. And you ended up with tickets. This is a story I get from the farm. You ended up with tickets to the Toby Keith concert. You take him to the concert, but better than that, you take him backstage. And he says, Toby Keith is back there signing autographs. He's got his head down. And Brad Albeck just walks in like he knew everybody in the building, just walks right in there and goes, TK! He says, Toby Keith just looks up and goes, Albeck. Right then, we knew Brad was hunting the farm. That was I still can hear that today. Old Toby Keith raised his head going, Albeck.
Oh, I could tell you some stories. And man, Toby's not doing too well health-wise. And him and my Uncle Stevie.
Yep.
my dad's younger brother, he used to run around, and he started out his career as like the house band for Uncle Stevie, and kind of got him, to the right people. And I mean, and Toby always loved sports, so Stevie would call Stanley, and we'd get tickets to the Final Four or this NBA game, and get to meet that. And it was good little networking.
Man, that was a great story, though. Brad Albeck with Toby Keith. And anyway,
he called my truck one night. He was in between shows, and he stopped in the club in Atlanta. And he had his big tour bus, and I think Sammy Kershaw was singing, and Lori Morgan was there, and, just in the crowd. And he looked at me, he goes, "Albeck, I'm dying for some steak and shake, but I don't want to take this big tour bus." And I said, "Toby," I gave him my keys. I said, "Listen, you're doing all these Ford commercials, all this. This is my truck, not Uncle Steve's truck. You wreck my truck, Toby, you buy me a brand new one." And I gave the keys. And he's like, "I'll see you later." And I got to go say goodbye to that Floyd Morgan. But he didn't say it too happy.
Oh, man. That's a great story. And
but he took my green G71 to Steak and Shake. He said, "I'm starving."
Well, Brad, I appreciate you, buddy. And hopefully...
Hey, George, you look good, and I hope to see you in Oklahoma, man. And, man, those duck calls I got from you and goose calls are working.
I knew I sent that, and I said, "This is, I think, Brad's style. I've known you long enough.
Yeah.
Small geese." I said, "This is, I think, will work well for you." And I was proud. We went through a rough time when we sold to a big corporation out in New York, and like everybody else, little guy kind of is at the bottom of the pole. But we started another company just this time, my wife and I redesigned everything, and then we started a company with COVID coming out, but. I was truly blessed because our first year, with Lynch Mob, we did things, and definitely we had more people and we did more things. But we're growing, we're making a great base. But the cool thing is, our first year in Waterfowl magazine, Skip Knowles was the editor there, and our nosedive duck call was the top pick for 2022. And then in the goose call division, our old man made top pick. So I said, not bad for an old redneck kid that came from Michigan. So. We're
not too bad for an old deer hunter.
Yeah, for an old deer hunter, that's right. And I've seen some. And we're still killing the big deer out here. So, but anyway, buddy, Diane and I are planning and coming down there this month to see you and try to get a couple days in hunting with you, and try maybe even bring a camera guy with us if you don't have a problem with that. And
I don't have any problems.
I look forward to seeing you. You've been a friend for a long time, and my kids, guys. I just want to tell you a story. My kids, it was one of the big thrills for my kids because we kind of lived outside of the town, but we'd go into the city and the suburb there in Adrian, not far from Adrian College. But one of the treats for my kids is they get all dressed up in their Halloween costumes and
every year
to go see your mom and dad, and they would make over them like they were their kids. And they get all this candy and stuff, and your dad was so great with kids. Oh, my gosh. He was so great with my kids, and that is a memory that I will remember, and my kids remember for a lifetime now, going to Albeck's for Halloween. So I appreciate you taking your busy schedule, taking some time to talk.
He's 89, and he's still mad at every single deer or every single duck or goose that flies.
It'd be awesome.
I try to get him a good buck this year because, like he says, and one night at 20 yards, and he shoots a shotgun in a slug, to a Beretta A400 with a Savage just cylinder, and he can hit a softball at 50 yards. We only shoot at 20 yards, and he come in and he was like, "I had that great big 6," and I go, 8 points or bigger outside the ear, Dad. Well, then I had all these does. I said, "No does on that farm, Dad." "You know I'm running out of time, don't you?" He goes,
bless his heart.
89 years old. He still loves to deer hunt, duck hunt, and goose hunt.
God bless him. We'll tell him that we said hi, and Brad, again, I thank you. And folks, if you like this, please subscribe to this and check us out. And always remember, Legendary Gear, go to legendarygearusa.com. Check out all our calls. Go to YouTube. I think it's George. What is it, Di? George?
Legendary Gear with George Lynch.
Legendary Gear with George Lynch on YouTube. Check out all our YouTube. Check out this show, this podcast.
Let them know that if they don't know what call's good for them, you'll fit them with the call if they call you.
Oh, the boss says, let them know that if you don't know what call's good for you, call George and he'll let you know what call's good for you. And always remember, hunt safe, hunt smart, and may the good Lord be your guide.
Well, I'll be out there, rain is shining, all a part of the great design. Bring it on, I can never get enough, because that's what legends are made of.